And this evening, it's a pleasure to welcome Rev Antonio Illas, who is the coordinator or the missioner for the Migrant Farmworkers Project in the Diocese of Niagara. That was one of the three pieces that we directed funds to for the reading of the Christmas Carol. So for some of you, that may have been your first introduction to this project. I first met Antonio almost 2 years ago at the Conference for Clergy and Licensed Lay Workers for the Diocese of Niagara. And there was someone there who was our key speaker by the name of Stephen Cottrell, who has since become the Archbishop of York. So that was a great occasion, and good to meet Antonio. I don't know, other than synods, if we've really seen one another much since. Antonio's down at the other end of the diocese. So anyway, Antonio, welcome, and I'll hand it over to you. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you, Paul. And, it's nice to be here. Thank you so much. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for the invitation to be your speaker tonight. And thank you so much for your gift through your Christmas Carol fundraising. It is appreciated, and the entire amount of your donation is used for this ministry, the Migrant Farmworkers Project in the Diocese of Niagara. It is a project that is hosted by 3 parishes: St. Albans in Beamsville, St. John's in Jordan, and Christ Church McNabb in Niagara-on-the-Lake. I am the missionary, and very soon it'll be 2 years that I have been here in the diocese, and I am having a blast. I am having fun. It's been great ministry in this diocese. I am from Puerto Rico. I am from the Spanish Caribbean, and I have done ministry in the U.S., to our south in Mexico, and now here in Canada. And all I can say is that it's been a privilege to serve and to have been chosen to serve, especially those that are vulnerable in our midst, in our communities. Tonight's presentation, I have titled it, Migrant Farmworkers' Rights and Access to Justice. In this presentation, I will address the principle of migrant farm workers' rights and access to justice here in Canada during their work season. Migrant farm workers, their rights are anchored on human rights. We are all human beings before being classified as citizens or permanent residents or temporary residents or foreign nationals or visitors, etc. We are all in the family of God's creation. We all have been created in God's image. We are people, first of all. Why is the theme of access to justice and rights, as well as peace, so important? And why do they matter so much today in a COVID-19 new normal? I will not address these questions from a constitutional or legal perspective, as I am not an attorney, but a priest, but I will address these 2 questions from a natural law, a moral ground, and social justice, as well as my own Anglican and Christian faith tradition. I believe that natural law is a body of unchanging principles regarded as the basis for all human conduct, universal moral standards, and basis for a just society. I remind you that St. Thomas of Aquinas, in his Summa Theologica, writes that an unjust law is not a law, but a perversion of the law. As natural law is passed to humanity by a divine presence, and we, as people of faith, committed to the values of the kingdom of God and the good news of God in Jesus Christ, must be committed to love, peace, justice, and the human rights of all peoples, especially those that are most vulnerable and in the margins of our society, as the gospel stories of Jesus remind and show all of us. From our own faith and religious tradition, in our baptismal covenant, in the vows we make or our godparents make if we were an infant, first, we are called to proclaim by word and example the good news, the love of God in Christ. And second, we will seek and serve Christ in all persons, loving our neighbors as ourselves. Third, we will strive for justice and peace among all people and respect the dignity of every human being, which includes the migrant farm workers in our midst, in our agricultural fields here in the Niagara Peninsula and in Canada. In the Abrahamic religious traditions, and basically all world religions, we are called with a relationship, we are called to have a personal relationship with our Creator and to love and respect the dignity of our neighbors. The vast majority of Spanish-speaking migrant farm workers, the Migrant Farm Workers Project serves, come to Canada from Mexico under the Seasonal Agricultural Workers Program, which has provided the province of Ontario fruit, vegetable, and flower growers a vital source of labor since 1966, 54 years, over half a century. This program was created to address a chronic shortage of domestic seasonal workers. Today, as the COVID-19 new normal and pandemic has shown us, migrant farm workers are classified as essential workers by the federal government and are indeed needed for the labor force of Canada and Canada's food security. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the project, which came into existence in 2013, provided these migrant workers with bikes for a nominal fee. We had a clothing bank, a medical clinic, as well as complemented by farm visits by the missionaire and many of our volunteers, and religious services, and a community meal after each weekly service, as well as pastoral care when needed. Under the new normal, we continue to provide pastoral care as requested by the migrant farm workers, and we have established a grocery bag drop-off program and a clothing delivery service for migrant farm workers out in the field. The program has been a total success. We have blessed many migrant workers in the field and have complemented through this grocery bag drop-off program their groceries with traditional ethnic Mexican products. The seasonal migrant farm workers, I strongly believe, should be entitled to adequate and decent housing during their work season in Canada. It is unjust, I believe, to provide overcrowded and sometimes called third world housing to the migrant farm workers in our midst. During my first season as migrant farm workers missionary, in a meeting with Member of Parliament Chris Biddle, the primary issue of concern I presented him was the housing conditions of migrant farm workers in the Niagara region.
That's what it says right there.
And since COVID-19 has shown us, since it started back in March of 2020, we have read numerous news articles and we have seen on TV reports about the migrant farm workers and reports that address migrant farm workers' housing as well as other employment issues. A year and a half ago, Canada initiated an open work permit for migrant farm workers and migrant workers in general. I believe the open work permit was a positive first modest step to address migrant farm workers' labor rights in Canada. When a migrant worker suffers abuse at the hands of an employer, but more needs to be done for migrant farm workers in reference to their immigration status in Canada. In regards to migrant farm workers' immigration status, Bishop Susan, on June 29th, 2020, wrote a letter to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, which states, in part, in addition to monitoring workplaces to ensure employers are meeting public health directives, Canada must provide status for all and landed status now. This means that everyone in the country without permanent resident status must be regularized and given permanent resident status immediately, including migrant workers, study permit holders, and refugee claimants. She added, Prime Minister, the present crisis has created a unique opportunity for Canada to enhance the dignity of migrant workers and other vulnerable people. And I would say tonight that the present pandemic and the present crisis that we all face today has created a unique opportunity for our parishes, for us as Anglicans, for us as Christians, to be able to serve the most vulnerable in our midst. 3 benefits of permanent resident status. First, permanent residents will benefit the migrant farm workers' family structure and make it stronger, as the migrant farm worker will not face family separation as they do every year when they leave from home back in Mexico or Central America or the Caribbean to come to our fields for 8 months during the year. They come by themselves. They cannot bring their family members with them to labor in Canada. Allowing the migrant workers' children to immerse into Canadian culture would be a benefit if the migrant farm worker was provided with permanent resident status. The family can come and the children can immediately immerse into the culture, the rich culture of Canada. I believe the ethnic diversity and multiculturalism will continue to enrich this great country. Second, permanent resident status will provide the farm worker upper employment mobility by providing the migrant farm worker the opportunity to move to another sector of the economy. And third, permanent resident status will provide the migrant worker and family the option to remain in Canada after retirement. And here I would like to share a story with you. I have served and I have known and I have established a relationship with Louise. Louise has been coming to Canada for the past 31 years. Louise has spent most of his adult life working in the fields, committed, dedicated to the fields of Canada for 31 years. He has resided in Canada for 8 months every year. Out of those 31 years, he has spent most of his life in Canada. As he is contemplating retirement and to enjoy the benefits of his hard work, Louis does not have a right to remain in Canada. He has a right to collect his pension back in Mexico because his temporary resident status under the agricultural program does not provide an avenue for permanent residence. So in spite of having spent so many years here in Canada, at retirement, Louise has to return home and cannot stay and enjoy retirement here in Canada. The same thing would apply to his health benefits. Once he goes back to Mexico, he will not have health care as he would have here in Canada, and he has contributed through the tax system as migrant farm workers pay taxes as any Canadian permanent resident or citizen do every year. So it is a matter of justice, as our bishop has said in her letter to the Prime Minister. And it is a story that I share with you tonight, and hopefully you'll have questions and we will proceed in the Q&A session. But this is only a story I would like to share so that you can see why the access to law, the access to human rights, the access to justice is so important to this community of vulnerable people that year after year come to work in our fields. This program has been in existence since 1966, and I don't see it being rescinded. On the contrary, as COVID has shown us, migrant farm workers are essential farm workers. They are essential workers and needed to work in our Canadian agricultural sector. In conclusion, The Gospel of St. Matthew reminds us, whenever you did it for any of my people, no matter how unimportant they seemed, you did it for me. May we all be blessed as we are a blessing to this community of neighbors in our fields during 8 months of the year. And with that, I will be open to questions and provide the floor to the moderator, Judy.
Thanks, Antonio. A couple of questions popped up during the talk. Some of them have to do with COVID. So I'll take those two questions kind of combined. As essential workers, are they prioritized for vaccination? And have there been changes to housing requirements to allow for social distancing?
No, the guidelines for migrant farm workers for the vaccination are the ones established by the government, and migrant farm workers are not have not been categorized. They're not a category. They're not a category as migrant farm workers for the vaccine. So more than likely, it'll be on the age group when they'll get their shot. Like I pray we all do, but they are not a category for themselves to obtain the vaccine. And what was the second part of the question?
Have the requirements with regard to changes in housing requirements to allow for social distancing?
Yes, in the Niagara region, public health, the standards, the requirement have changed. Fortunately, the twin bunk beds will no longer be permitted, and the 2-meter space requirements are mandated. But this season is in transition, so this benefits in housing, or these new guidelines will be fully enforced next season. So that'll be 2022. But this season, the ones who can transition to the new requirements are encouraged to do so, and farmers, employers have started doing so. So no more bunk beds, the twin beds, they won't be allowed, and they are providing for the 2 meters and a divider in living quarters. So yes, fortunately for migrant farm workers, housing guidelines, new housing guidelines have been established to comply with the COVID-19 protocols and requirements.
Right. Antonio, what percentage of migrant farm workers are women?
About 10% are women migrant workers that come from Mexico and the Caribbean. Actually, migrant farm workers. I don't know what percentage would be migrant workers, that category nationally. So I'm speaking about migrant farm workers. Yes.
Right. Another question was, does the open work permit allow the migrant farm worker to change employer? I guess there's some backstory on that too. I think that question comes from somebody who's fairly well informed about these issues, because as I understand, the current regulations, that their work permit is for a particular farm. And so if they experience any unsafe conditions or human rights abuses on that farm, they don't have right of access to kind of complain about that, because they can't just leave that farm and go to another farm, that their work permit is for only a specific farm. Is that changed with an open work permit?
Yes, the migrant farm worker can take advantage of the open work permit if he or she is abused, or the employer turns out to be unscrupulous with behavior or benefits to the migrant farm worker. So the farm worker and actually the legal clinic, the Niagara Legal Clinic, has worked on behalf of one or two migrant farm workers related to employer issues. So yes, under the new open work permit, the migrant farm worker could search, and that's that's the catch, right? The federal government would provide the avenue for the migrant worker to go out and solicit employment, but the industry, the agriculture sector, it's a very united sector. There are associations, they are organized, the employers. So it would be an uphill battle or very difficult for a migrant farm worker to take advantage of an open permit in another farm, because it'll know that, you know, migrant worker John Doe has complained about his employer. So in practicality, it would be very hard, and we don't have any cases yet of a migrant farm worker leaving a farm and having gained employment in another farm.
Yeah. Let me slow down. How many migrant farm workers are there within, say, the Diocese of Niagara? What type of housing are they provided with, and where is that located?
We have, in our region, we have about 4,000 in the Niagara region. We have about 4,000 migrant workers that come to work. Nationally, we have a little over 50,000, 55,000 migrant farm workers that come into Canada. Out of those 55,000, the province of Ontario gets half. So Ontario employs about 25,000, about half the national number that comes. And the Niagara region, where the project serves, we have about 4,000 migrant workers that we serve. And in our grocery bag drop-off program, we serve 78 migrant farm worker residences. And we call them residences because one farm, you could have one farm that has several housing units. So we go by address, and currently we serve 78 addresses of migrant farm workers here in the Niagara region, mainly in Niagara-on-the-Lake and in the town of Lincoln, in Jordan, Beamsville, and the city of St. Catharines.
There was another question from Ian, what is the response from politicians? What's the rationale that politicians give for not giving permanent residency?
I don't know of any, one would have to ask the members of parliament, but you know, in any political scenario, migrant farm workers don't vote. They don't vote. They are not Canadian citizens. So this community of workers in Canada have no political say or pressure because they cannot vote. They are not unionized. Migrant farm workers are not allowed to be members of a union or association. So in any political system, if you're not organized, you're not a citizen, you can't vote. It's very hard for migrant farm workers to have a say in Canadian politics. So it takes Canadians, it takes nonprofits, or it takes Canadian organizations to speak on behalf of this community of vulnerable people that are in our midst. And that, I believe, it's one of the reasons why not much has happened. And as opposed to the employers, where they are a very well organized community in Canada. You know, farmers, the agri-food industry is, organized. It has political influence. So that is the political reality, and I believe that's why not much has happened to benefit migrant farm workers in Canada.
Hmm. One of the things you talked about was that there are 3 parishes that act as hosts to the ministry in the Diocese of Niagara. What does that mean, that they act as the hosts, parishes in Beamsville and McNabb and Jordan?
Being a host, each parish is autonomous in the way they host and serve with this ministry, with the project. For example, prior to COVID-19, at our St. Albans location in Beamsville, the parish, the building, we would have the medical clinic. We have actually space that was made into a medical clinic, into a medical facility, and to meet those requirements with waiting room, the privacy. So we had that space at St. Albans. We also had another space for our clothing bank. We call it the tiendita, the store, because migrant workers love the clothing bank. It's needed, the clothing ministry. So at St. Albans, we had the physical clinic, medical clinic, where we would serve once a month, once or twice a month, the migrant workers. We would have the clothing bank, and we could use their nave, their worship space. We could use to celebrate a mass. So I would celebrate a mass on Sunday, and after the mass, we would have a community dinner to provide the migrant farm workers the social space, to have a forum, to be able to socialize with migrant workers from other farms. And that's the way we would use the space at St. Albans. And the team there would be volunteers from St. Albans and also from the community in Beamsville. At St. John's in Jordan, again, we could use their space to celebrate a mass, to have a community meal, and to do other activities. And at Christ Church McNabb in Niagara-on-the-Lake, again, we could celebrate mass in their nave, in their sanctuary. We would host a meal in their parish hall, and we could also provide clothing and bikes. And also our bike shop is also at the Beamsville location at St. Albans. So our bike ministry, our bike shop would be run from St. Albans. So the parish that hosts the ministry, they would decide what they would do or how they would do ministry with the migrant farm workers, and in the partnership with this ministry. There is no diocesan mandate as to what parishes do. So the ministry operates on the basis of what the parish wants to do within their parish.
Right. You mentioned that many migrant farm workers are here for 8 months of the year. So that would include like March and November. What work is going on like during the winter months, during those colder seasons?
You still have migrant farm workers here year-round. I spoke about the seasonal agricultural workers program, the one created in 1966, because that's the one that brings the most, and those are the 8-month max. There are other programs, there are other migrant programs that bring migrant farm workers to Canada. So mainly the migrant farm workers, the Spanish migrant farm workers I serve from Guatemala and Honduras, from Central America, they come under other migrant worker programs with a 1-year to 3-year visa. So they are classified under a different program here in Canada. And some of our greenhouses they bring those workers in. So during the cold winter months, let's say November, December, January, February, our greenhouses are still working with migrant farm workers, but they come under those programs with a 1 year to 3 year visa and not the 8-month seasonal, the seasonal agricultural program that it's up to a max of 8 months during a year. So there are two different programs running out there for migrant farm workers.
Mm. Yeah, I guess we associate the growing season as being kind of the hot months, but not realizing that there are greenhouse operations, there are floral greenhouse operations, there are, somebody mentioned to me, like, even like Christmas arrangements you buy at Costco, probably come from migrant farm workers somewhere in Ontario, working in, places that are doing like Christmas floral arrangements and things like that in greenhouses or hothouses.
You are correct. Actually, some of the migrant farm workers I serve in Niagara on the Lake, the ladies mainly, and mainly those tend to be women migrant farm workers. So the Christmas, the Valentine's, now in February, the 14th, St. Valentine's Day, all of those arrangements and Christmas, they are mainly done by women migrant farm workers in my area here in Niagara on the Lake, in many of the greenhouses. And even with cold weather, even now, very soon, the vineyards, the grapevines, it's a very specialized area of agriculture. And even during cold months in March, you will see migrant farm workers out in the field, and many times with snow on the ground, already pruning and working with the vineyards. So the wine industry, the vineyards, is very, it's very specialized. It takes lots of care and attendance. And migrant workers start working in the vineyards next month in March.
You can see
why
you can see why the clothing program is so important, because they're not necessarily going to bring cold weather clothing with them. And to have gloves, waterproof footwear, hats, good coats to be able to do the work, because that's not provided by the farmer, I presume, cold weather clothing.
No, it's not provided. And people say, why have a clothing bank? Well, I mean, if you're out in the field, you rip your clothing, it gets muddy, you rip it, it breaks, it tears. So every year it's the same. Our warm clothing program, as we do deliveries, we've been doing since January. As soon as they come, they start asking for this warm clothing because it's needed. It's cold. And it does get cold in some parts of northern Mexico, but for the most part, Mexico is, it's a very warm, subtropical, tropical climate. So many of the migrant farm workers come from, warm climates, and the Canadian cold, cold weather, it's very hard on us. I'm from the Caribbean, so winters here are very...
You're adapting still.
Yes. And this winter, I could not go back home because of the COVID-19. So this is my first full winter in Canada, and it's just very cold. My vitamin D, I went to the doctor and I have to take, when I first started, she was giving me like 50,000 units of vitamin D. Then it went down to 5,000. Now I'm 2,000 daily on vitamin D. So, metabolically, just by, physiologically, just being here, it's hard on our body. So if you're not from this climate, and clothing is needed. So it was a very successful program. And why do we need so much clothing? Well, you're out in the field, you're going to tear it. It's going to get muddy. You're going to, in the vineyards, in the pruning, you destroy, it just tears. And
yeah.
That's why you need clothing all the time.
So there's some questions. I'm not going to ask them all in order. Some people can see the questions. There's some I'm going to end with, but some shorter questions. Are most migrant farm workers Spanish speaking? Are there other language groups represented?
Oh yes, there are migrant farm workers from the Caribbean, the English Caribbean. So we have a great percentage from Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, St. Lucia, many of the, the former English colonies in the Caribbean, they do come to work in the program. Mexico sends a robust, and Mexico is growing very quickly. I would say the majority of migrant farm workers nowadays are coming from Mexico. It's becoming very quickly the majority, but you still have a sizable from Central America. You get some migrant farm workers from Vietnam, from the Philippines. You get some. Those are smaller numbers, but I have encountered them in the field. Vietnamese, Filipino, and some Chinese. I've seen also in the field, very few, but you get variety from many places and languages.
Yeah. Are there other Anglican dioceses that have missioners to migrant farm workers like Niagara, or is this a unique program in Anglican diocese in Canada?
I believe we are the only one. I know the national newspaper for the Anglican Church, the Anglican Journal, has made reports, and there are other dioceses that do ministry, but it's a local parish, like
Yeah.
a local church in an agricultural area decides to welcome migrant workers or to work with them. Those you have in British Columbia and in Huron, you have a parish that does work with migrant workers, but I don't have a counterpart in another diocese here in Canada. Someone full-time or half-time being a missionary to migrant farm workers. No, I have not found that counterpart.
So a couple of questions about sort of action and response that we can take. It's really enlightening and so helpful to have you as our speaker this evening, because we all knew that we were contributing to this ministry by the fundraiser that we did in December, but really putting some context and stories behind that of what we are supporting. And I wonder, so a couple of things in response. Is it helpful for us to perhaps, be in conversation with our local members of parliament about these issues? And what are the concrete steps that we can take long-term and short-term to support not only the immediate needs, but also the wider justice issues?
Yes, everyone can contribute. As Deirdre in her justice ministry, social justice, reminds us, weekly we can all contribute to make the kingdom of God real in our communities. We all can do our share by getting organized and speaking to our members of parliament on behalf of migrant farm workers, the needs they have. Permanent, following the guidance and the letter of Bishop Susan, as she wrote to the Prime Minister. It's a diocesan, it's a bishop's asking of the government, and we all can follow, writing our own letters and calling our MP's office. So yes, we can all get organized in whatever capacity we can, right? To speak on behalf of those who don't have a voice in Canadian politics or the political system. So citizens can have a voice and will be heard by their MPs. As I tell everybody, everybody that asks, what can I do? Pray. Pray for the migrant farm workers in Canada, in your neighborhood. Before COVID-19, when I started 2 years ago, my first year, I was out there, as I was invited or any forum I would get, I would say we need to make the invisible community visible. The migrant farm worker community here since 1966, when the program was created, when I got here 2 years ago, totally invisible. We never spoke about the migrant farm workers in the fields as our neighbors. Unfortunately, COVID-19 hit, this pandemic that has brought us a new normal, and it's horrible. But the positive I have seen with the news coverage has been great, because when COVID hit, we have seen in the newspaper, in printed media, television programs, the news, we have seen the struggle, the needs, the living conditions of migrant farm workers. So now the issue is out there, and migrant farm workers are not as invisible as before.
Mm-hmm.
So again, yes, we can pray for the migrant farm worker community and tell others about the Migrant Farm Workers Project. In the diocese, we have about 90 parishes, we have 90 congregations, and I'm sure not all of them know about the Migrant Farm Workers Project. We are on the diocesan webpage, we have our own webpage, we have our Facebook page, and I'm almost sure that not every parish knows about the Migrant Farm Workers Project. So pray, tell others about it. You can always volunteer your time. You can volunteer your talents, your skills to this ministry. You can make a donation. You can do a fundraiser. You can do many things on behalf of this ministry and migrant farm workers in the Niagara region. And, Google up the local farms in your area, and I wouldn't be surprised you have a migrant farm worker neighbor in your neighborhood, in your local farm. So connecting is very important.
Thank you. That's some very practical, steps we can explore more together as a community and talk about how we can respond individually and collectively.
Thank you, Judy. Antonio, my goodness, 2 years ago almost, when I first met you at that diocesan clergy and licensed lay leaders conference in Aurelia, I had a deep respect for what you were accomplishing. But after tonight, my goodness, I have an even deeper appreciation for your work and ministry in the diocese here. I thought it was daunting having the care and cure of maybe 400 souls in Elora, but 4,000 people in your parish basically is what you're looking after. Is astounding. So we will pray for you, Antonio, and if there's anything that St. John's can do to support this ministry from the far northern part of the diocese, and maybe, as you say, we need to be looking out to see who our neighbors are, we'd be happy to learn more. And doing all of this, of course, in a new climate that throws a complete wrench in your metabolism. It's astounding, really. So we bless you, and thank you for this evening.
Thank you.